Good evening, everyone. I am Prerna, Chair IEEE SPS Chapter. Webinar on radar systems. Before we begin today's webinar, we have a small introduction since this is our last. So, IEEE SPS chapter was introduced in GSET last year, and now this year we have taken up an initiative and we have been funded $300 for the conduction of our events. We've successfully completed today is our last event. All our events were conducted with humongous response. We have had 4 quizzes and 8 webinars continuously. Today's radar systems webinar is our last event. We had IEEE Olekson and Teresa Agripolius. So I want to thank Dr. P. Sudhakar and my team for advising us and making sure that all our events are successfully. Now I request Tulsi, Secretary IEEE SPS, to introduce our speaker for today.
Today, our speaker is Professor B. Harikumar. Sir, Professor B. Harikumar is the Professor and Dean Academics at Gitanjali College of Engineering and Technology, Chirial, Hyderabad. He has an enormous teaching experience of 35 years, various administrative positions such as HOD, Associate Dean, and Dean. His research areas of interest include microwaves, antennas, and global positioning systems. He has published 15 research papers in various international and national journals and presented about 10 papers at various prestigious conferences. He is known most widely in teaching electromagnetic theory, antennas, and microwave courses for the GATE exams. It is a pleasure to have you with us today, sir. Now I request sir to take over the session.
Thank you for the introduction. So, good evening to all of you.
Good evening, sir.
So now I'm sharing my notes and then some slides also. The slide is it visible to all of you?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
I'm going to discuss about the working principles of radars. So mainly CW radar and then pulse radar, FM CW radar, MTA radar, and then different tracking radars. And mainly I'm going to concentrate on MTA radar and radars. Okay. But this MTA radar is basically a combination of a pulse and a CW radar. So before we actually discuss about the MTA radar, discuss about the pulse and CW radars. Okay. So we're going to discuss MTA radar. Radar is an acronym for radio detection and ranging. Radar basically has got a transmitter, and transmitter transmits a signal towards the target, and then the signal is intercepted by the target. A part of the signal will be reflecting back. Signal will be processed to determine the range of the target, velocity of the target, azimuth and elevations of the target, angles of the target. So in fact, in radar terminology, the distance between the radar and the object range, the distance range. Similarly, the object found is known as a target. Okay. Basically, when you compare, by using a pulse radar, of the target. By using CW radar, the upper velocity, that means the velocity with which the can always be obtained. By using FM CW radar, both this information, the radio velocity as well as the range of the target can be obtained. Similarly, the empty radar also allows us to differentiate the moving targets in the presence of a light. Actually, once again, we can find out from there. Actually, we can find out the relative velocity of the target and also the target. And in fact, most of us have a feeling that military applications, but radar is used for many civilian applications. Okay, for example, if you take a tracking radar, continuous information about a particular target. The target can be a normal aircraft that is probably coming from Dubai to. Okay, it provides a continuous information in the sense that it gives us for every 10 seconds or 5 seconds. It provides us at what height the aircraft is traveling, what is its decimal angle, and what is the elevation angle. Like that, actually, for civil applications also, radar is used. For finding the weather, forecasting of weather also, radar is used. Okay. First of all, if you can pass radar, okay. So in the case of pulse, a pulse is transmitted towards the target, and the pulse is intercepted by the target after traveling a distance of r, assuming that r is the range. The distance between the radar and the target is r. Traveling a distance of r, the pulse will be intercepted by the target, and then the part reflecting back. So if you can find out at what time the pulse is transmitted and at what time the pulse is received. In this time interval, let us call it as TR. TR is the pulse to go to the target and then come back to the radar. So during this time interval of TR, the signal, the pulse has traveled a distance of 2r. So with what velocity the signal travels? The signal travels with the velocity equal to light velocity. So 2r is equal to c into tr. So if you can find out the tr is the time taken for the pulse to go to the target and then back to the radar, it can be obtained. Okay. And if you look at the block diagram of a pulse radar, so basically we've got a transmitter. Normally, magnetron is used as a transmitter. You know what is the reason for that? So it's high frequency and high efficiency oscillations. Okay, compared to a two cavity, in fact, reflection oscillator, magnetron is more powerful. Okay, so that's why in most of the radar applications, radars, magnetron is obviously used as the source of microwave. And then we got a pulse modulator. What is the function of this pulse modulator? To switch on this magnetron for a certain time and then off for the remaining time. Like that, it will be continued. Okay, so we can treat this as a pulse. We can always treat this as a pulse. It is something like here, for example, at time t is equal to 0, there is a pulse. At time t is equal to 1 millisecond, 2 milliseconds, like that. For every 1 millisecond, we are transmitting a pulse. So pulse means during that on period, okay, magnetron is made on, and during the remaining period, magnetron is made off. Okay. So next, we got a duplexer. We are going to discuss more about the duplexer in the last unit. What is the function of the duplexer? So whenever we use a single antenna, both for transmission and for reception, we can use in fact, we have to use this duplexer. Basically, this duplexer consists of two gas discharge devices. One is TR, the other is ATR. What is the function of this TR? TR protects the receiver circuit when during the transmission time, because the signal that is transmitted is very, very high. The peak power is going to be of the order of, and the average power is going to be of the order of a few kilovolts. A few kilovolts. Okay. So if there is a leakage of signal, okay, from the transmitter to the receiver, so receiver will not be able to withstand to these high powers because sensitive that it is capable of handling only a few milliwatts of signal. So we need to protect the receiver from the high power signal, and then once the signal is received, because the same antenna is used for reception also, that received signal has to be directed towards the receiver circuit, not to the transmitter circuit. So these are the functions of the duplexer. Basically, it has got TR and ATR devices. TR is used to protect the receiver during transmission time, and ATR allows the signal to be directed towards the receiver circuit, not to the transmitter circuit. So now this particular part is the receiver part, and this is of course the transmitter part. So here, for example, for every 1 millisecond, I am transmitting a pulse. At time t is equal to 0, I am transmitting the first pulse. Okay. At time t is equal to 1 millisecond, I am transmitting the second pulse. Like that, the pulse repetition time is equal to, let us say, 1 millisecond, and pulse repetition frequency is naturally 1 kilohertz. Okay. So once a pulse is transmitted at time t is equal to 0, this pulse goes towards the target. There it gets intercepted, and then a part of the signal will be received. Okay. So during this off period, that means in the absence of transmission from t is equal to 0 to 1 millisecond, we don't have to use the antenna as a transmitting antenna because already at time t is equal to 0, a pulse is transmitted. So until I transmit the next pulse, I can use the same antenna as the receiving antenna. So that means the services of antenna are used on time sharing basis. During the on period, the antenna is used as a transmitting antenna. During the off period, where actually we expect the echo pulse to come back and then received by the receiving antenna, the same antenna can be used as a receiving antenna. It is something like, for example, here at time t is equal to 0, I am transmitting a pulse at 1 millisecond, at 2 milliseconds. So during this period between 0 to 1 millisecond, I am using the same antenna as the receiving antenna. So to 0.667 milliseconds, I am receiving the corresponding echo pulse, like that. Okay. So once again at time t is equal to 1 millisecond, only for a few microseconds, once again the same antenna is used as a transmitting antenna. Then for 1 milliseconds to 2 milliseconds, that can be used as a receiving antenna, like that. Okay. Next. Now, if you look at the receiver part, the first one is low noise RF amplifier. You know why it has to be a low noise RF amplifier? Any reason for that? It has to be a low noise RF amplifier because if you look at the receiver, it has got so many blocks: RF amplifier, mixer, IF amplifier, detector, and then video amplifier. Each one is going to produce its own noise. You might have studied about the thermal noise, okay? A source of noise, okay? And the overall noise figure, suppose if the first device, it is creating F1, this is F2, this is F3, this is F4, this is F5. And if you want to find out what is the overall noise figure, the overall noise figure is equal to F1 plus F2 minus 1 by GA1. Probably you might have studied that equation also. This is basically F1 plus F2 minus 1 by G1 plus F3 minus 1 by G1, G2, etc. Now here the point that you have to understand here is to reduce the noise figures of F2, F3, F4. F will be equal to F1. So that means suppose if the second device, the third device, and the fourth devices are not at all contributing any further noise, but still F is equal to F1. So the overall noise figure mainly depends upon the first device, the noise figure of the first device, that is F1. So we need to keep this F1 as small as possible. So here, what is the first device? RF amplifier. So it has to be low noise. Is it done? So F1, which indicates the noise figure of the RF amplifier, okay, it has to be as small as possible. For example, if you look at this equation, okay, for example, this is a band pass filter, low noise amplifier, and then attenuator, amplifier, etc. we got. Okay. And if you look at what is the, I don't think I need to discuss about this particular problem. I just want to tell you what is the importance of this low noise amplifier, RF amplifier, okay, as the first device of the receiver circuit. So F1 plus F2 minus 1 by G1. So if you find out what is the total noise, it is going to be 2.03. Out of this 2.03, 1.58 is a noise created by the first one, 1.58. So most of the noise, okay, the overall noise figure, most of the contribution is made by the first device. So it is essential that the first device has to, in fact, should not create noise. F1 should be as less as possible. That is the reason. Okay. So now the RF signal is converted into IF frequency by mixing with the local oscillator signal. Okay. And then that IF signal is amplified by the IF amplifier. So here, the function of the IF amplifier is very, very important. It is known as a matched filter. It provides, or actually it gives, it maximizes rather peak signal to mean noise ratio. That's how actually the match filter IF amplifier is designed. Then of course we got a second detector where actually you can extract the envelope, and then that can be displayed comfortably onto any of the scopes, a scope or a PPI display. If it is a scope, actually you will be able to see the strength of the signal. Okay. Now, how do I fix the pulse repetition time? For example, for every 1 millisecond, I'm transmitting a pulse. Can it be 0.5 milliseconds or can it be 2 milliseconds? On what basis I'm going to fix the pulse repetition time? It all depends upon the maximum range at which you are expecting a target. It is something like, for example, for every 1 millisecond, I'm transmitting a pulse. Okay. For example, I'm looking for a target which is at a distance of, let us say, 100 kilometers. Then, what is the time taken for the pulse to go to the target and then back to the radar? 2R by C. 2 into 100 kilometers, 100 into 10 to the power of 3 by 3 into 10 to the power of 8. So it is 0.667 milliseconds. So at time t is equal to 0, when I transmit a pulse, it takes a time of 0.667 milliseconds to go to the target and then come back to the radar. So I'm going to receive the corresponding echo pulse at 0.667 milliseconds. So I'm very sure that whatever echo pulse that I have received is due to the pulse that I have transmitted at the time t is equal to 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find out what is the value of TR. TR is what? 0.667 milliseconds. And then I'm going to find out what is the range. Range is going to be 100 kilometers. Okay. So in this way, there is no ambiguity in the measurement of a range. The point that you have to understand here is I'm able to receive the echo pulse before I transmit the next pulse. I'm receiving the echo pulse at 0.667 milliseconds and I'm transmitting a second pulse at 1 millisecond. Before I'm transmitting the second pulse, because I'm able to receive the first echo pulse, okay, I'm very sure that whatever pulse that I have received at 0.667 milliseconds is due to the pulse that I have transmitted at the time t is equal to 0. For example, if the range is 200 kilometers, let us see what is the value of TR. The value of TR is equal to 1.33 milliseconds. Okay, that means at time t is equal to 0, if I transmit a pulse, I am going to receive the corresponding echo pulse at 1.33 milliseconds. Is it done? Similarly, at time t is equal to 1 millisecond, if I transmit the next pulse, I am going to receive the corresponding echo pulse at 1 plus 1.33, 2.33 milliseconds. Okay. The problem with this one is, at any given point of time, it is possible to observe only one sweep. So this is what it appears at a given point of time. So by looking at this one, what we do normally, 1.33 minus 1. So we assume that the value of TR is only 0.33 milliseconds. But actually the value of TR is 1.33 milliseconds. Because we are able to observe only one sweep at a time. So we take TR as 0.33 milliseconds and accordingly we proceed, and the corresponding range that we obtain is 50 kilometers. But the actual range is 200 kilometers. So there is error, there is ambiguity in the measurement of range. Okay. So the rate at which we are transmitting a pulses, that means here actually for every 1 millisecond we are transmitting a pulse. It has got something to do with the maximum range that we are expecting or that we can measure. So here, when you transmit the pulses for every 1 millisecond, what is the maximum range that we can measure? How do you find out this one? Suppose if I increase the range, what happens? It takes longer time for the pulse to get received. Okay, until I transmit the second pulse. Suppose if I receive the corresponding echo pulse, something like a time t is equal to 0, I am transmitting the first pulse. Is it done? Before I transmit the next pulse at 1 millisecond, suppose exact day before I transmit the next pulse at time t is equal to 1 millisecond, I am receiving the corresponding echo pulse. Is it done? I am very much sure that the pulse that we have received at 0.667 but 1 millisecond is due to the pulse that we have transmitted at time t is equal to 0. So when TR is equal to T, okay, until that point of time, basically we can increase the range until TR is equal to T. That means TR is equal to T is equal to 1 millisecond. So what is the maximum range that we can measure? It is going to be 150 kilometers. So that's why for a target which is at range of 200 kilometers, we are not able to measure that range without any ambiguity. That is the reason. Okay. Suppose if you want to measure the range of this target which is at a distance of 200 kilometers without any ambiguity, what is it I have to do? Instead of transmitting the pulses for every 1 millisecond, now I have to transmit the pulses for every 2 milliseconds. Is it? Now there won't be any ambiguity in the measurement of range. So the point that you have to understand here is the maximum range that can be measured without any ambiguity. It depends upon the pulse radiation frequency or pulse radiation time. In fact, R unambiguous is equal to C by 2FP. Okay. Next. Now, how do you say that a target is detected or not? See, manually we cannot keep on looking at this one and then finding out whether there is a target or not. So what is normally done is we keep a threshold level. So we continue to receive the signal and then we keep a threshold level. So whenever the signal, the strength of the signal is more than the threshold level, then we say that there is a target present. Suppose if the strength of the signal is less than the threshold level, then we say that it is a noise signal. It is something like, for example, I got three potential targets A, B, C. I'm looking for all these three targets. Suppose if I keep the threshold level too high, then only the pulse that is coming from the echo pulse that is coming from target A is able to overcome the threshold level. That's why the target A is definitely can be detected. Target B and target C, we will be missing out. Suppose if I keep the threshold level too low, something like, for example, here, if I can keep the threshold level too low, then what happens along with the potential targets A, B, C, sometimes noise alone is able to overcome the threshold level. Suppose if noise is able to overcome the threshold level, we assume that there is a target, though there is no target, okay? Because the noise is able to overcome the threshold level, we assume that there is a target. Then that target is called a false target. Okay, so this is basically the problem that we encounter while threshing up, while keeping up the threshold level. Suppose if the threshold level is kept too high, there is every possibility that some of the potential targets can be missed. And if I keep the threshold level too low, what happens? Along with the desired targets, there is every possibility that there will be occurrence of false targets. That means noise will be able to overcome the threshold level and appears as a target, though there is no target. So we need to strike a balance between these two. Okay. Next, one of the main drawbacks of this pulse radar is it is not possible to measure the relative velocity of the target. You know what is the reason for this one? What is the reason for this? Because we are not able to measure the frequency shift of the echo signal. Suppose F0 is a transmitted frequency. We are only measuring the time taken for the pulse to go to the target and then back to the radar. So we are making a timing mark. We are able to measure what is the value of TR, by means of which we are able to find out the range. But unfortunately, we are not able to determine the velocity of the target. So for that, what we do is we use a CW radar. If you look at CW radar, so basically it works on the Doppler principle. You know what is the Doppler principle? If either the source of oscillation or the observer is in motion, then there will be apparent shift in frequency that results in. So here how this has to be taken, suppose you look at the block diagram. So you got a CW transmitter here. CW transmitter, and of course it generates microwaves. Let us say the frequency is F0. So the signal of frequency F0 is transmitted towards the target continuously. So this signal gets intercepted by the target, and then a part of the signal will be reflecting back. Okay. In case if there is a relative velocity between the radar and the target, then if the echo signal differs from the transmitted frequency by an amount of FD. That means if F0 is a transmitted frequency, F0 plus or minus FD is the frequency of the echo signal. Okay. So what we do is we combine these two, we mix these two signals in a detector, in a mixer. Actually, the difference of frequency is obtained. The difference is FD. Okay. That is ultimately you will be able to measure what is the value of FD. Okay. So this is the basic idea. FD, the Doppler shift, is proportional to the velocity. You can see that FD is equal to 2 VR by lambda. So what we are doing is we are measuring the value of FD, Doppler shift, the frequency difference between the transmitted signal and the received signal. If you can measure this FD, you will be able to find out what is the VR. Okay, VR is equal to FD into lambda by 2. So here one of the limitations is F naught plus or minus FD. What exactly you mean by this one? If there is a closing target, the frequency of the echo signal is F naught plus FD. Target, the frequency is F naught minus FD. What is basically a closing target? Because the target is a moving target, there are two possibilities. The distance between the radar and the target with respect to time, or it can decrease with respect to time. So as time progresses, suppose if the distance between the radar and the target decreases with respect to time, that means the target is traveling towards the radar. That particular target is known as the approaching target or a closing target. Then the echo signal frequency will be F naught plus FT. Okay. If it is a receding target means as time progresses, if the distance between the radar and the target increases with respect to time, that is known as a receding target. And for that receding target, the echo signal frequency is F naught minus FT. Unfortunately, the sign of the Doppler velocity, whether it is plus FD or minus FD, is lost in the mixing process. And of course, we got a separate mechanisms to determine whether it is a closing target or a receding target. Next. What is the, or actually rather, what should be the frequency response of this bit frequency amplifier? Basically, it is a low frequency amplifier. It should be like this. It is supposed to provide gain for all the expected values of FD. For example, you are looking for a target, okay? The value of FD is, let us say, between 0.1 kilohertz to 1 kilohertz. So this is the expected range of FD. And the bit frequency amplifier is supposed to offer equal gain for all these possible frequencies, 0.1 kilohertz to 1.0 kilohertz. This is. At the same time, it is not supposed to offer gain for a DC signal. When do you get this DC signal? Basically, that means FD is equal to 0. When FD is equal to 0, the transmitted frequency is same as the echo signal frequency. So when the target is stationary, when the target is not at all moving, stationary, then what happens? Because VR is equal to 0, what is the value of FD? 0. Then in that case, the transmitted frequency is F0 and the echo signal frequency is also F0. Because our aim is to determine the velocity of the moving target, the target which is moving with some velocity. So those DC signals for which FD is equal to 0, they are not supposed to be amplified. That's why for the frequency 0, it is not offering any gain. Next, when it comes to indicator could be just earphones, a pair of earphones. If you just want to find out whether there is a moving target present or not, then once there is a moving target, you can observe a beep sound, okay, in the earphones. You just know whether there is a moving target or not. But if you want to find out the velocity of the target, naturally the indicator has to be a frequency counter. Once the indicator is a frequency counter, you can find out what is the value of FD. Once FD is measured, you can find out what is the velocity, FD into lambda by 2. Okay. So this simple CW radar block diagram, which is also known as a homodyne receiver, explains the working principle of a CW radar. But basically it is not the actual radar that is normally used. Because one of the main drawbacks of this simple CW radar is entire amplification is done by a beat frequency amplifier, that is at low frequency. At low frequencies, flicker noise is going to affect the performance. Flicker noise is inversely proportional to frequency. So at low frequencies, the impact of flicker noise is going to be more. So if you want to reduce that flicker noise, most of the amplification has to be done at a higher frequency, something like a higher frequency. It's done in the case of So in the case of a practical CW radar, F0 is a transmitted frequency, and then we locally generate IF signal. Now we are going to combine these two signals, signal whose frequency F0 and then IF signal FIF. The output of the mixer contains the individual frequencies F0 FIF, F0 plus FIF, F0 minus FIF. So by using a sideband filter, probably you can remove the rest of the frequencies except the upper sideband SFIF. And then the receiver, what is the frequency of the signal that is received by the receiver? F0 plus or minus FD. Now, when you combine these two signals, F0 will be cancelled, FIF plus or minus FD. So basically, this signal is at the IF frequency. And this signal can be amplified by using IF amplifier. Because IF frequency is much higher compared to this FD, and most of the amplification is done by IF amplifier, the effect of flicker noise can be reduced. Okay. After that, of course, this signal, which is at a frequency of FIF plus FD, will be combined with IF signal. Then once again, the difference frequency is FD. Okay. So ultimately, we are going to measure FD, and from that we can find out what is the relative velocity. So next, one of the main limitations of this CW radar is range can't be measured. Only velocity of the target can be measured. What is the reason for that? Because the transmission is continuous, reception of the signal is also continuous. As such, there is no timing mark made to measure the time taken for the signal to go to the target and then back to the radar. Because transmission as well as reception is continuous. Do is this drawback of not able to measure the range of the target by CW radar can be overcome by using FM CW radar. In the case of FM CW radar, of course, I'm not discussing about the multiple frequency CW radar because the maximum range that can be measured is only lambda by 2. It is not of practical interest. This is the maximum range that can be measured, which is not of practical interest. Multiple frequencies CW radars. To some extent, we can increase the maximum range, but still that is not of practical importance. So that's why I'm not discussing that. And I'm going to discuss about the frequency modulated CW radar. See, in the case of frequency modulated CW radar, instead of transmitting the signal at a constant frequency of F0, the frequency is changed in a known fashion. For example, here I'm increasing the frequency linearly as time progresses. Okay. In the case of CW radar, the frequency of the transmitted signal is constant. F0 is constant. Now, F0 is not constant. I'm increasing the frequency gradually. Like, for example, at time t is equal to 0, frequency is 100 megahertz. 1 millisecond, 110, 2 milliseconds, 120. Like as time progresses, I'm increasing the frequency. Okay. Now, this signal, let us say at time t is equal to 0. What is the frequency of the signal? 100 megahertz. That is transmitted towards the target. The time taken for the signal to go to the target and then come back to the radar is 1 millisecond. So the signal of 100 megahertz, which is transmitted at time t is equal to 0, okay, is going to return millisecond. So this is the echo signal. Okay. At 1 millisecond, I am going to receive the echo signal, first echo signal. Similarly, at 1 millisecond, I am transmitting 110 megahertz. It also takes a time of 1 milliseconds to go to the target and then come back to the radar. So the corresponding echo signal is received at 2 milliseconds. Okay. So what we do here is, at a particular instant of time, for example, let us say at time t is equal to 3 milliseconds. What is the difference between the transmitted signal and the echo signal received? 130 minus 120. So it is 10 megahertz. So this 10 megahertz gives you an indication of the range of the target. Because, for example, suppose if you increase the range, naturally the signal takes more time to go to the target and then come back to the radar. For example, you have increased the range in such a way that now the signal takes a time of 2 milliseconds to go to the target and then back to the radar. So what happens at time t is equal to 0, you are transmitting the signal at time t is equal to 0. It takes a time of 2 milliseconds to come back. So at what time I am going to receive the corresponding echo signal? 2 milliseconds. So now at 2 milliseconds, what is the frequency of the signal? It is 100. Now if I find out what is the difference, it is 120 minus 100. Now it is 20 megahertz. Okay. Now the 20 megahertz indicates that now the range is increased. Is it? So we call this as the beat frequency. The beat frequency is the difference in frequency between the transmitted signal and the received signal at a given point of time. So this beat frequency gives us an indication of the range of the target. Okay. Now, so in this particular example, we are increasing the frequency indefinitely. Some periodicity has to be there. So I cannot keep on increasing the frequency. It goes to hundreds of megahertz, thousands of megahertz, and then a few gigahertz, hundreds of gigahertz. So indefinitely I cannot increase the frequency. There is a limitation on the increase in the frequency. So some periodicity has to be there. So that means after increasing the frequency to some extent, once again, frequency has to decrease. So in fact, in a triangular fashion, I am changing the frequency. Okay. Now Tm is the time period of the signal. You can call it as a modulating signal. That's how I am changing the frequency. Once again, let us take one simple example. A time t is equal to 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. Okay. 100, 110, 120, 130, 140, 150. Okay. After that, I am decreasing once again. Now I am decreasing the frequency. 140, 130, 120, 110, like this. Okay. So now once again, let us assume that the signal takes a time of 1 milliseconds to go to the target and then back to the radar. So here at 1 millisecond, I am going to receive the signal of frequency 100. So once again, if you find out the difference, it is going to be 10 megahertz. So this 10 megahertz indicates, or actually it is proportional to the range. So once this beat frequency is measured, you will be able to measure the range of the target. Suppose if there is a moving target, I want to find out the Doppler shift also, FD also. If I can measure this Doppler frequency shift, that allows me to calculate what is the relative velocity of the target. And if I can measure this FR is basically this 10 megahertz, that allows me to determine the range. So FMCW radar is capable of measuring the range as well as the Doppler velocity. Let us see how it is done. Suppose if there is a closing target, then what is the frequency of the signal? Frequency of the echo signal is same as the transmitted frequency, except there is a time lapse. Is it not? At time t is equal to 0, when I am transmitting a signal of 100 megahertz, the corresponding echo signal is received at time t is equal to 1 millisecond of the same frequency. The difference between these two, that means the frequency of the transmitted signal at 1 millisecond and the frequency of the signal that is received at 1 millisecond. 110 minus 100, the 10 megahertz gives you an indication about the range. Now, to this echo signal, okay, that 100 megahertz, I have to add this 1 megahertz also, because now the target is an approaching target and the corresponding Doppler shift is 1 megahertz. So now it becomes 101. Similarly, 110 becomes F0 plus FD. So 110 plus 1, it is 111, 121, 131 like this. Okay. Now if you find out the difference, now the difference is going to be 9. Is it right? 110 minus 101 is 9. Similarly, 120 minus 111 it is 9. Now here it becomes 11. For example, here it is 11. Is it? 141 minus 130. It is going to be 11. So during the increasing part of this, we are getting FR minus FD. During the decreasing part, we are getting FR plus FD. So individually, we know that FR is equal to 10 megahertz, FD is equal to 1 megahertz. So this 9 megahertz is obtained because FR minus FD is equal to 9 megahertz, FR plus FD is equal to 11 megahertz. So I want FR from this. What I have to do? 9 plus 11 by 2. Suppose if I take average of these two, 9 plus 11 by 2, that means I am going to get 10. What is that 10? 10 is same as what is obtained here. So this 10 megahertz obtained because of the range. Okay. Similarly, how do you find the Doppler shift 11 minus 9 by 2? Suppose if I can find out the difference, average of this difference, 11 minus 9 by 2, that gives me 1 megahertz. That 1 megahertz is nothing but FD. So because you are able to measure this FD, you will be able to determine the relative velocity of the target. This is it. So during the increasing part of this triangular wave, you get FR minus FD. During the decreasing part, you are going to get FR plus FD. This FR minus FD is 9 megahertz. FR plus FD is equal to 11 megahertz. So what I have to do is, suppose if I use a average frequency counter, which gives us the average value of these two, FR plus FD plus FR minus FD by 2. The average value is FR. In this case, it is going to be 10 megahertz. So from that, you can find out what is the range. And then if you use a switcher frequency counter, the switcher frequency counter measures the average of the difference of these two. That means FR plus FD minus of FR minus FD divided by 2. Then you are going to get the value of FD. So once you get FD, from that you can find out the Doppler velocity. Okay. So now I'm going to discuss about the actual topic, that is a MTA radar. MTA radar basically is a combination of pulse radar and CW radar. And actually we can expect that it has got the advantages of pulse radar, that means range can be measured. Similarly, the Doppler frequency, that means the relative velocity also can be measured because it's the combination of pulse radar and CW radar. Okay. In fact, a simple CW radar can be converted into an MTA radar by providing power amplifier and pulse modulator. So otherwise, actually, if I remove this power amplifier and pulse modulator, it is nothing but a simple CW radar, CW oscillator transmitting at a constant frequency. Then you got a receiver and then indicator. It is the same as the simple CW radar block diagram that we have discussed. So by providing these two blocks, power amplifier and then a pulse modulator, we can get MTA radar. So why do we need a pulse modulator? So because here, once again, we are going to transmit the signal in the form of pulses. It is not going to be a continuous transmission. Like in the case of a pulse radar, we are going to transmit the signal in the form of pulses. Okay. So because we are transmitting the signal in the form of pulses, that allows us to determine the range of the target. And then if you can measure what is the frequency difference, for example, ft is a transmitted frequency, and then if there is a moving target is there, naturally the echo signal frequency will be ft plus or minus fd. It differs from the transmitted frequency by an amount of fd. So if you can combine these two in a mixer, the Doppler shift fd can be measured. From that you can find out what is fd, and then of course relative velocity can be obtained. So it has got the advantage of pulse radar as well as a CW radar. So both range as well as the relative velocity can be measured. Okay. See, one of the main functions of this MT radar is to differentiate the moving targets in the presence of stationary targets. See, when a signal is transmitted towards the target, of course there is one desirable target that you are looking for. It doesn't mean that the signal goes only towards the desired target. Is it not? There is every possibility that a part of the signal can go to a nearby tree. Similarly, there is a huge building is there. Okay, a mountain is there. So there is a very possibility that you get reflections from these undesired stationary targets as well. Now it is, in fact, you need to differentiate these echoes, the signals that are coming from stationary targets, and then you need to differentiate the signal that is coming from a moving target. So especially when you're looking for a moving target, you need to identify that moving target in the presence of clutter, undesirable stationary targets. See, here the simple idea is, when you look at a stationary target, whenever a pulse is transmitted, the echo signal that comes from a stationary target doesn't change in amplitude. Suppose if there is a mountain, at time t is equal to 0, you are transmitting a pulse. Like a part of the signal is going towards the mountain and then reflects back. At time t is equal to 1 millisecond, you are transmitting another pulse. The mountain remains stationary. So you expect that the same amount of echo signal will be returning back from the mountain. Is it not? But on the other hand, if you look at a moving target, for example, you are looking for a missile or aircraft, it keeps on moving, is it not? So the signal that comes from a moving target changes in amplitude, okay, every time. That means at time t is equal to 0, when a pulse is transmitted, that pulse goes towards a moving target, and then a part of the signal will be reflecting back. The strength of the signal that is received from the same moving target for the next pulse is going to be something different because it keeps on moving. Is it not? So if you can differentiate, if you can identify the changes in the amplitude, okay, so wherever there is a change in the amplitude, probably you can say that there is a moving target at range. And if there is no change in the amplitude of the signal, then you can say that it is perhaps due to a stationary target. It is something like, for example, see, these are the two moving targets. The arrows indicate that there are two moving targets. Okay. Apart from these two moving targets, you got some stationary targets also. For example, here there is a stationary target which I am not looking for. Probably it is the reflection from a mountain or a tree, etc. Okay. Each one corresponds to one sweep. You know what is a sweep? For example, at time t is equal to 0, you are transmitting a pulse. Okay. At time t is equal to 1 millisecond, you are transmitting the next pulse. what all the signal that you receive before you transmit the next pulse is called one sweep. Is it not? So this is the first sweep. Okay, this is the second sweep. That means at time t is equal to 1 millisecond, I am transmitting the second pulse. Okay, before I transmit the next pulse at 2 milliseconds, this is the echo signal that I have received. This is the second sweep. This is the third sweep, like that. And as I have told you, at a given point of time, it is possible to observe only one sweep at a time. At a given instant of time, this is what is visible to you. So from the particular sweep, is it possible to identify the moving targets? Not at all possible. This is what you can observe on a scope. Is it not? So it is almost impossible to differentiate the moving targets from the clutter by observing only one particular sweep. But if you observe successive sweeps, for example, there are 4 or 5 sweeps, what you can do is wherever there is a change in the amplitude, for example, here you can see that the amplitude is changed. Once again, there is an amplitude is changed. So wherever there is a change in the amplitude, you can say that it is due to a moving target. Similarly, here also you can see that there is a continuous change in the amplitude. And wherever there is no change in the amplitude, you can say that they are the echoes coming from stationary targets. For example, here you can see that from one sweep to another sweep, there is no change in the amplitude. That's how actually you can differentiate the moving targets. Or actually you can superimpose all these successive sweeps. Then you are going to have a better butterfly effect. This is what is known as a butterfly effect. That allows us to differentiate the moving targets in the presence of clutter. So in terms of equations also, see CW oscillator, it is transmitting at a frequency of ft. So how do you represent the signal? For example, let us say A1 sine 2 pi ft into t. Now this is the reference signal at the same frequency. Okay, A2 sine 2 pi ft into t. Okay. Now how do you represent the echo signal? What is the difference between the transmitted signal and the echo signal? Echo signal, okay. In fact, there is a delay of 2r by c seconds between the transmitted signal and the echo signal, because once the signal is transmitted at time t is equal to 0, the signal has to go to the target. In the process, it covers a distance of r, and then it reflects back, and then it will be received by the receiving antenna. So during its to and fro transmission, it covers a total distance of 2r with a velocity of c. So 2r by c is the time taken for the signal to go to the target and then back to the radar. So what I mean to say is that time t is equal to 0 when the signal is transmitted, you are going to receive the corresponding echo signal after a time of 2r by c seconds. So the time delay between the echo signal and the transmitted signal, if you call it as t is t, which is equal to 2r by c seconds. Okay. Or actually, the oscillator voltage, the echo signal is sine 2 pi ft into t. How do you represent the echo signal? Ft t minus capital T, because the echo signal is delayed. Capital T is nothing but 2r by c. So when you expand this one, what do you get? 2 pi ft into t minus 2 pi ft into 2r by c. That means minus 4 pi ft r by c. Okay. Then, if there is a moving target, what happens? Fd also will be added. So now this is sine 2 pi ft plus r minus fd into t minus 4 pi ft r by c. So this 4 pi ft r by c is obtained because of the time delay. Is it not? Echo signal is delayed by a time of 2r by c seconds compared to the transmitted signal. Is it not? Now I am going to combine this echo signal with the transmitted signal. So this ft will be cancelled. So you get this as a4 sine 2 pi fd into t minus 4 pi ft r by c. See, the importance of this equation is, suppose there is, what is the value of FD? FD is equal to 0, is it not? Because what is FD? 2VR by lambda. If VR is equal to 0, FD is also equal to 0. Then what happens to this equation? A4 sine minus 4 pi FT into R by C. That means this V difference, this is going to be a constant value. Because once the target is stationary, Ft is constant, R is constant, C is also constant. So 4 pi Ft R by C is constant. So as time progresses, there is no change in the amplitude. In fact, the value of V difference lies between minus A4 to plus A4 because the maximum value of sine is plus 1 and the minimum value of sine is minus 1. But it is going to be constant. That's why for stationary targets, V difference is going to take a constant value. That's why the amplitude is not going to change from one sweep to another sweep. But when it comes to a moving target, because it moves with some velocity, VR has a value, then FD is equal to 2VR by lambda. FD also will be having some value. That means as time progresses, the amplitude keeps on changes because FD changes, FD into T as time progresses. Okay, the argument of the sine is going to change continuously, so as the amplitude of the signal. So we can conclude that if there is a continuous change in the amplitude of the signal, it is because there is a moving target. And if there is no change in the amplitude of the signal, that is perhaps coming from a stationary target. So this is how we differentiate the stationary targets, okay, and the moving targets. Or actually rather, the moving targets can be identified in the presence of stationary targets. So probably you know what is a PPI display and A-scope display. See, in the case of A-scope display, you are able to, in fact, look at the amplitude of the signal. But PPI display doesn't allow, is it? Angle versus range. You are not able to determine or actually have a look at the amplitude of the signal. Okay, so whenever we use A-scope as a display, whatever method that we have discussed, that means whenever there is a change in the amplitude, you can say that there is a moving target, and if there is no change in the amplitude, probably you can take it as a stationary target. But that doesn't work out for a PPI display because you are not able to observe the amplitude of the signal. Okay, the signal is there basically. You got first sweep and then second sweep. But the only thing is you're not able to visualize the amplitude of the signal, like in the case of A-scope. So here what we do is, suppose if you can subtract the first and second sweeps. Say time t is equal to 0, you're transmitting the first pulse. Is it done? Before you transmit the second pulse at time t is equal to, let us say, 1 millisecond. So this is the signal that you have received between 0 to 1 millisecond. Now this is between 1 to 2 milliseconds, between 2 to 3 milliseconds, like that. Okay. So there is a time gap of t seconds, which is equal to pulse repetition time between successive sweeps. This is between 0 to 1 millisecond, between 1 to 2 milliseconds, like that. Okay. So what we can do is, suppose if I can subtract the first and second sweeps, what is going to happen? Wherever there are stationary targets with unchanging amplitudes, upon subtraction, what happens? The amplitude is going to become 0. This minus this, it is going to become 0. But wherever there is a moving target, okay, and the signal that comes from a moving target, it keeps on changes from one sweep to another sweep. Is it not? Here the amplitude this much. Now for the second sweep, the amplitude is changed. So upon subtraction, okay, you will not get 0. So if you subtract the first and second sweeps, okay, Wherever you got stationary targets, okay, they will be removed. And wherever there is a constant change in the amplitude that is obtained because of the moving targets, okay, you will have the output. So that's how actually the moving targets can be differentiated in the presence of clutter when we use a PPI display. Okay. So what we do here, I need to subtract the first and second sweeps. So I'm going to use a delay line. Is it done? So subtractor, what basically it does is it is subtracting the first and second sweeps. Okay. So the signal, the echo signal that we have received between 0 to 1 millisecond is delayed by a time period of t, which is equal to pulse repetition time. And then it is subtracted with the second sweep that is present between 1 millisecond to 2 milliseconds. Is it? So that is the function of a delay line. Delay line basically um, offers a delay which is equal to pulse repetition time. So that it is possible to subtract the first and the second sweeps. But one of the main problems with the delay line is, for example, this is the output of the delay line, 2k sine pi of d into t. So if there is a stationary target, naturally the value of fd is equal to 0. So what is the output of this delay line canceller? V is equal to 0 because fd is equal to 0. Is it that? Okay. But unfortunately, no doubt, of course, it eliminates the clutter, stationary targets. But unfortunately, it also eliminates some of the potential moving targets. For example, whenever pi of dt is equal to pi or 2 pi or 3 pi, we know that sine pi, sine 2 pi, sine 3 pi, in general, sine n pi is equal to 0. So whenever this pi into fd into t is equal to n times pi, then the output of the subtractor is equal to 0. That means whenever fd is equal to 1 by t equal to fp or 2fp or 3fp, the output is going to be 0. That means suppose there is a target which is moving with some velocity, or let me tell you an example here. Just 1 minute. This one. I think somewhere I missed out. Okay, for example, we are transmitting a signal, let us say at a frequency of 3 gigahertz. If you find out what is the value of lambda, it is going to be 0.1 meters. Suppose there is a target that is moving with a velocity of 50 meters per second. And if you find out what is the corresponding value of fd, 2 VR by lambda, it comes to 1000 hertz. That means it is going to be 1 kilohertz. So FD is 1 kilohertz. And I am transmitting the pulses, let us say, for every 1 millisecond. So what is the pulse repetition frequency? 1 by 1 millisecond, that means 1 kilohertz. So here, it so happens that the value of FD is exactly equal to pulse repetition frequency. Is it that? So once the value of FD is equal to pulse repetition frequency, this is the situation. FD is equal to 1 by T. What is 1 by T? Is equal to pulse repetition frequency. What is the output? Output is becoming 0. Because the output is 0, we assume that there is no moving target. There is only a clutter, there is a stationary target. But there is a potential target which is moving with a velocity of 50 meters per second, but the radar is blind in detecting that particular target. Okay, so this speed of 50 meters per second, okay, is known as a blind speed. The second blind speed is 100 meters per second. Next blind speed is 3 times 150 meters per second. So if there is a target that moves in such a way that the corresponding value of FD is equal to FP or 2FP or 3FP. Is it? Those targets will not be able to be detected by the empty radar. So that is one of the main drawbacks of this empty radar. Empty radar is not able to detect these potential targets. It becomes blind. Okay. So, in order to overcome this one, probably what we can do is, see, these are the first blind speed is n is equal to 1. That means 1 into fp into lambda by 2. Second blind speed is 2 into fp into lambda by 2. Like I have told you, suppose if the first blind speed is 50 meters per second. Second one is n is equal to 2. That means 100 meters per second. Like that. So, if you can see that the first blind speed is very large compared to, okay, that means it provides a Doppler shift in such a way that it is much higher than the pulse repetition frequency. Then this occurrence of the blind speeds can be avoided. So, if I want to see that V1 is very, very large, there are only two possibilities. Either I can increase the value of Fp or I can increase the value of lambda. So, unfortunately, lambda is not going to be in our hands. The frequency at which the signal has to be transmitted is fixed. So there is only one thing that is in our hand, that is the pulse repetition frequency. Okay. So if I can increase the pulse repetition frequency in such a way that the first blind speed, okay, is more than 50 meters per second, for example, and the corresponding value of FD is going to be more than FP, then empty radar doesn't become blind. That is one possibility. But unfortunately, in this, what happens is, if you can increase the value of FP, what happens? Already we have discussed the maximum range, the maximum unambiguous range that can be measured. It all depends upon the value of FP. If the pulse repetition frequency is 1 kilohertz, what is the maximum range that we can measure? It is only 150 kilometers. Suppose if you increase that to 2 kilohertz, only 75 kilometers of range can be measured. So, an increase in FP is going to put limitation on the maximum range of range that can be measured. That is another problem. Okay. Then of course, I'm going to discuss about the tracking radar also. Next one. See, basically tracking radar means any radar that provides a continuous information with regard to its range, Doppler velocity, and then azimuth and elevation angles can be called as a tracking radar. Okay. There is actually a difference between a continuous tracking radar and a track while scan radar. Continuous tracking radar supplies a continuous information on only one particular target, whereas TWS, track while scan radar, provides discrete information on one or more number of targets. And of course, we are going to discuss only about the continuous tracking radar. So in the case of a continuous tracking radar, antenna beam is positioned, okay, using a servo mechanism comprising of motors. And those motors are actuated by error signal. It is something like, suppose if the target is moving from right to left, then naturally you need to shift the antenna beam also from right to left. That is done by using a servo mechanism, and those motors are controlled by error signals. And there are different ways of generating that error signal. One is by using a sequential lobing, the other is using a conical scanning, the third one is using a monopulse radar. For example, see, in the case of a sequential lobing, the lobe is switched alternatively between two positions. So this is the switching axis. That means the signal is radiated first of all towards the left hand side, okay, and then towards the right hand side. So when it is in the radiating in the left hand side, let us say the beam is positioned in A, beam position in B. Suppose if the target is in the same line as that of the switching axis, then in both the cases uh, the same signal is, that means the same amount of signal is received, beam A and then beam B, is it? Then you can say that the target is aligned with the switching axis. On the other hand, suppose you got a target somewhere here, is it not? It is more towards beam position A. Naturally, when you switch the beam towards the target in the position A, we expect that the strength of the echo signal is more. And in the position B, when you switch the beam towards the right hand side in the position B, the strength of the signal is going to be less. So what we do is we measure the difference in amplitude. So suppose in position A, we got V1. In position 2, we got V2. V1 minus V2 gives you the error signal. Okay. Next. So instead of switching the beam alternatively between two positions, an extension of this one, that means when you keep on rotating the beam continuously, then that becomes a conical scanning. That becomes a conical scanning. See, let me also show you. Practically, what is done to track a flight. I just give you the site also. So at this instant of time, so these are the flights that are moving throughout the world. So wherever you got this blue color flights, they indicate that they are getting the information from satellites, whereas the rest of the flights are getting information from ground stations. Okay, so if you concentrate on a particular flight, I hope it is visible to all of you. In fact, you can see the movement of flight also. Are you able to see the movement of the flight? Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
This is. Right, this is the flight information. Similarly, also let me flight aware. Not this one. Okay. This is not it. Actually, you can also have various data. Basically, continuously, the data is available. So what I mean to say is that for every 10 seconds, azimuth angle, elevation angle, the velocity at which the flight is traveling, and then at what height it is traveling, that information is you can obtain on a continuous basis. Somehow this is not working, I do not know. Anyway, let us go back here. So finally we got a monopulse tracking radar. So if you look at the sequential lobing or actually conical scanning method, they need some minimum number of pulses to determine the position of the target. Okay, for example, it is something like in the case of sequential lobing, you got a target somewhere here. You got a target somewhere here. Suppose if you switch the beam on one side here, then alternatively next on the other side, you won't get any reflection because the target is somewhere here, is it? So naturally, it takes some time, probably 3 or 4 switches are required in order to obtain the information. But sometimes actually, with only a single pulse transmission, you should be able to determine the position of the target. Okay, that's why it is known as a monopulse tracking radar. Only with a single pulse transmission, you will be able to determine what is the position of the target. Okay, but before I discuss that, there is a difference between a tracking radar and a search radar. Search radar has got the radiation pattern whose beam width is very large compared to tracking radar. A tracking radar, something like a pencil-like beam, it has got a radiation pattern like a pencil-like beam. The reason for this one is, it is something, suppose there is an information that one student of Gitanjali Engineering College is affected with COVID-19. Then we know that there are 4,000 students in the college. So how do you identify that? For each student, we need to measure the temperature. It takes probably a very long time to find out who is that person, who that student is. On the other hand, suppose if some information is given, the student was carrying, let us say, circuit theory and then ECAD notes. Then you know that student belongs to second year EC. Then you can limit your search only to second year EC students. Similarly, the function of the search radar is, because it has got a very large radiation pattern, I mean to say that with the large beam width. For example, you got a target somewhere here. So this is the radiation pattern of a search radar. So initially, this signal is transmitted in this direction because it has got a large beam width. In a lesser time, it is going to cover the entire area. Now there is no signal. What it does is, then it transmits the signal in this direction. Now in this direction, there is a target. So what it does is, it provides this information to the tracking radar. For example, this angle is theta1, this angle is theta2. So it provides information to the tracking radar that you don't have to search for the target in rest of the area. You need to limit your search between theta1 to theta2. So what the tracking radar does is, it limits its operation only, search only to between theta1 and theta2. Otherwise, a tracking radar employs only a pencil-like beam radiation pattern. Suppose this is the radiation pattern. First, the radiation will be in this direction. There won't be any reflection. Then it has to scan in this direction. It radiates. Like that, it takes longer time to cover this area because the beam width of the antenna that is used by a tracking radar is very small, of the order of, let us say, 3 degrees. So it takes longer time to cover this volume. So initially, we use a search radar that gives you an approximate position of the target. Let us say that means the target can be obtained between theta1 to theta2. And then the tracking radar limits its search between theta1 to theta2. Like that, okay? So in the case of a monopulse radar, we employ simultaneously 4 radiations simultaneously, A, B, C, and D. Okay. It is something like, suppose you got a target above this horizontal line. So this is the horizontal line, is it not? Above this line. Then the signal that is received by A and B is going to be more. Is it right? So that means, for example, A plus B minus C plus D is going to be positive because it is above the horizontal line. Okay, A and B, the strength of the signal received by, naturally you are going to have four antennas. Okay, they keep on receiving the signal. The signals received by four antennas A and B is going to be much more higher compared to the signals that is received by C and D. Similarly, for example, the target is slightly towards the left hand side, somewhere here. Then signals received by A and D is going to be more compared to B and C. Similarly, suppose it is towards right hand side. Naturally, B and C, they receive higher strength compared to A and D. Suppose if it is in the bottom, below this horizontal line, C and D, the signals received by the antenna C and D is going to be much more compared to that of A and B. So by looking at the strength of the signals received by A, B, C and D, it is possible to determine the exact position of the target by employing only one pulse. Similarly, now for example, if I find out what is A plus C minus B plus D, so I'm subtracting A plus C and then B plus D. Is it that? Suppose if A plus C is more than B plus D, what does it indicate? It is above this horizontal line. Is it that? Similarly, A plus B minus C plus D. Suppose if A plus B is more than C plus D, it indicates that the target is slightly towards the left hand side. Okay, you got a vertical line here. It is the target is towards the left hand somewhere here. Is it not? So finally, this is the last one. Phase comparison using monopulse. Okay. So once again, the signal is transmitted towards the target, and then here we measure the phase of the signals. Okay. For example, I'm applying two antennas, antenna 1 and antenna 2. The target is somewhere here. The signal that gets radiated from point 1, that means let us say antenna 1, covers a distance of R1. So also the signal that is transmitted by antenna 2. You can see that because they cover the same distance, the phase of these two signals also will be same. So when you make the phase difference between the two signals that is received, it is going to be 0. On the other hand, suppose the target is here, then you can say that this is R1, this is R2. Now you can see that R2 is much smaller compared to R1. Is it not? Naturally, the phase difference between 5 and 5, let us say 5 is this phase of the signal associated with the first one, 5 is the phase of the associated with the second signal. If you can find out the phase difference, that gives you an indication about whether the target is towards the right hand side or towards the left hand side, or if the phase difference is 0, you can say that the target axis is coinciding with the that means it is exactly at the middle. So here delta phi is proportional to theta. If delta phi is equal to 0, that means theta is equal to 0. Theta is equal to 0 means it is exactly along the center part of this. That's how actually using phase comparison monopulse, the target can be tracked. So I think with this I've completed probably I would have taken up only MTA radar without discussing about the pulse and SW radars, because that was taken a lot of time. I was in a hurry to complete the portion. Okay, but anyway, so with this, we've come to an end. Okay, thank you very much for giving me an opportunity. Okay,
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. If anyone has any questions, please drop your questions in chat box or please unmute.
so any questions you got?
I think there are no.
Okay, okay.
We will move on with the session. I now request Anuhya, Vice Chair SPS, to extend vote of thanks.
Thank you, Tulsi. I take this privilege to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of IEEE Signal Processing Society. I thank Professor B. Harikumar sir for delivering a profound lecture on radar systems. Thank you, sir. My sincere gratitude to Dr. Sudhakar, advisor IEEE SPS SPC, for guiding us in the conduction of events. I thank college management, faculty, IEEE SPS SPC for providing this opportunity. I would also like to thank all the EXCOM members and volunteers for coordinating this event today. Our heartfelt thanks to everyone for being here today and making this event a success. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Right, thank you, thank you.
This event we have marked the completion of our events which we received under $300 funding, and with this we have completed our series of events. Thank you everyone for cooperating with us. Thank you, sir, for delivering an excellent lecture. Thank you, everyone.
Right.
And
Yeah. Also, please fill the Google form in the chat box for your participation certificates.